Hello everyone, I'm Benjamin Kier. This is the Benjamin Kier Show. Beautiful week in Miami. Great weekend. It's really starting to look like summer around here. The mood is different in South Florida. It's the perfect time of year. Our sports teams are doing well. Business is booming right now in Miami. And we got it. We have got it. On Thursday evening, Miamians celebrated as the City of Miami Commission voted and gave Inter Miami CF the green light to proceed with Miami Freedom Park. Miami Freedom Park is more than a stadium. It's as authentic of an entertainment hub as you will find. The stadium will have a capacity for at least 25,000 fans, hotel space, retail areas, green space, little mall area, and it will potentially host the Miami Hurricanes, the football team. When Miamians woke up on Friday morning, they were waking up to a better city of Miami than the one that they found. And that is a testament to the Moss family. The Moss family who has put in a tireless amount of hours and assets and financial ability as they could into a stadium and into a project that would bring soccer to Miami and bring soccer to the forefront of the United States. So they get absolute credit for what they've accomplished. They'll finally get to start working on the stadium. This journey has been going on for over 9 years. They've vowed to bring soccer to Miami, and now they're finally living out that dream alongside David Beckham. It'll be excellent to see once it's completed with an estimated completion in March of 2025. We've also got some historic events that happened in the past week, truly once-in-a-lifetime occurrences. We just covered one of them, and now I'm going to address the other. What's interesting is that either of these stories could easily have headlined this show. They could have kicked off our show. Both are firsts in their respective sporting category. Both will change the trajectory of sports culture and the very practice of how business is done, and both have to do with some amazing Latin American trailblazers. So let's get to it. Over the weekend, Katie Taylor beat Amanda Serrano via split decision. This fight is a one-of-one for so many reasons. First off, you never see the number 1 pound for pound take on the number 2 pound for pound in the world. It's one of boxing's flaws. We don't always see the best fighters competing in the best fights. Ariel Helwani talked about this prior to the bout. The last time that a 1 fought a 2 was in the early 2000s, and it was a male bout. And I know we'd like to believe that that wasn't so long ago, but we're already in the year 2020. The year 2000 was over 20 years ago. 2012, which feels like it was yesterday, and it's crazy to say this, was already 10 years ago. Context. I love it. I appreciate it. I think it's important when I'm talking on this show. I'm a firm believer in needing to understand the how before you understand the why. How did we get to this point, and why are we in this situation? So part of that how includes the two fights' main promoters. Social media juggernaut turned boxer Jake Paul, and arguably the best fight promoter in the world, certainly boxing's best, Eddie Hearn. This fight happened because of Jake Paul. Even the bigwigs in boxing know it, and they've admitted to it. To make a super fight like this happen, Amanda Serrano wanted her worth. She needed it. She knew this was a payday fight, and she had a number in mind. But what we've heard, and what's been left unsaid, what we can deduce, it seems like she couldn't make it happen before because they couldn't agree to terms. It was impossible for each of the other sides to get the deal done and reach a middle ground with her. Even with a 40-plus win fighter, multiple division champ, she wasn't enough. Because there's a preconceived notion that female fights don't sell, because female fighters aren't as good or they can't promote their events as well. That's becoming more and more of a myth every single day. Jake Paul found out about Amanda Serrano, put her on his undercards, gave her a whole new audience, which has fallen in love with her talent and her skill. And they become true admirers of her work ethic. So now they were able to come back to the table after a couple bouts underneath Jake's cards, and they were able to say, hey, this is a main event, this can sell, I know it's going to sell, and this is the number that I want. Amanda was able to do that for the very first time, probably in her entire career. And this time around, the number was achievable. The fight itself was one of the best I've ever watched. Women, men, MMA, boxing, it was amazing. I watched the entire thing. Couldn't take my eyes off the bout. Now, round 5 was the big one that everybody seemed to be talking about. The rounds were a little bit controversial because Amanda had said prior to the bout that she was pushing for 3-minute rounds. That was a rumor. She wanted to make it like the men's bouts. She felt that they were equal enough to do it. This was definitely the fight for a commission to test that out on. It didn't happen, however. So, 2-minute rounds. We get to round 5, and I've used this a lot when I'm talking about fights. Amanda Serrano put on a masterclass on Katie Taylor. Put a masterclass on her face, unfortunately. The amount of punishment that Katie Taylor took in that round was dangerous, and it was a little bit uncomfortable to watch towards the end. But it was the first time that Katie Taylor in her entire career had been wobbled like that. She seriously could not get her footing right. She must have poured every ounce of energy and mental fortitude to making sure she didn't go down. I'm in shock that there was not a knockdown scored in that round. Excellent fight. Here's another interesting thing. Going into that, Amanda Serrano had an average output in her last couple fights of 69 strikes thrown per round. In that round, Amanda landed 44. She landed 44 when she usually only throws 69. So she definitely won that round. It was a round that everybody thought would be, okay, this is what Amanda does. She works the body early, and then she really just goes after your head, quite literally. That wasn't the case. Katie Taylor, whether it was her coach, her corner, her mental fortitude, she brought it back. It was amazing to watch. She really stuck in there. She ended up being the more efficient fighter in the end, throwing less strikes but landing more. She had higher percentages in defense, a higher defensive rating, a higher output rating. She was amazing, and it ultimately ended in a split decision. Now, the million-dollar question, quite literally, where do they go from here? Immediately after the fight, when they were interviewing the promoters inside the ring, Eddie Hearn gave the perfect response to the question, will we see a rematch? He said, absolutely, and like a perfect boxing promoter, he also gave the terms. He worked up something along the lines of, Katie has fought for such a long time. She's so dominant. It's been a very long time that she's been in the fight game. We don't know how many fights she has left in her. We don't know how many years she has left in her. We'd really love to see her return to Ireland for a main event. That's the perfect scenario. Now, the last time that Ireland really went crazy for a fight was, of course, the person who was the 1A, 1B in Ireland's, who is the greatest competitive fighter, or combat fighter in their history, Conor Mcgregor. When Conor McGregor made his return. And people fell in love with that. They showed up. They showed out. It was an excellent showing. That sold. Ireland has showed that as a home country, they will support their own. They interviewed Jake Paul right after. He, too, also said, absolutely, he did a good job of selling I believe at most it was a draw. I don't think Amanda lost. We'd seen Jake do that before. In his first fight with Tyron Woodley, he said, this was a split decision win. I don't think it should have been a split decision, however. And he's questioned boxing. He's questioned the judges. He's questioned scoring. He's even called into question if there should be more judges and how it should be scored and if it should be round by round. So we knew he was going to do that. He does an excellent job of being combative as a promoter. Here's where the alarm went off in my head. Here's where Benjamin Cure really started thinking. So Eddie Hearn made his second appearance on the MMA Hour, which is Ariel Helwani's show, in person, in studio, to talk about the match, his own career, and see what was going to happen later on with some of his fighters. That conversation included the Katie Taylor-Amanda Serrano rematch. They talked about it. They also got into the Jake Paul versus Conor McGregor conversation, how they've been going back and forth on Twitter. And here's where things get very interesting. When Ariel asks Eddie Hearn about the possibility of Jake versus Conor and who would win, I can't remember the exact context, but Eddie starts talking, he gets rolling, and he says something to the effect of, actually, Nakisa approached us with the idea of a Katie Taylor-Amanda Serrano rematch on the card as the same night as Jake Paul versus Conor McGregor. Ariel didn't ask further about it. Eddie Hearn didn't seem like he was joking. Here's what I want to know. If I told my audience right now, or if I was telling a friend of mine or a fellow journalist, hey, would you mind being my co-host on the Benjamin Cure Show if the Benjamin Cure Show was going on ESPN or was going on Fox Sports? Why would I propose that kind of question unless I was already in negotiations with that group? Why would Nakisa, the co-manager and the co-promoter of Most Valuable Promotions, Jake Paul's promotion company, MVP, why in the world would he dare to suggest, even as an idea, or float the idea, hey, would you be open to having Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano fight their rematch on a Jake Paul, Conor McGregor undercard if they weren't already talking to Conor in the UFC? Jake announced that he's fighting August 13th. The opponent has yet to be released. It was rumored that BJ Flores, his coach, had a quick post and delete, or he posted the date as well, but he didn't post an opponent. It's probably going to be Tommy Fury that Jake Paul faces off against if I was a betting man. But in the case that it's not, I would not be surprised if after all this talk, all this back and forth on Twitter, the buildup that we've seen, Conor weighing right now the heaviest he's ever been in his pro fighting career, if that opponent for Jake Paul was in fact Conor McGregor. Like I said, I have no insight on this. It's most likely Tommy Fury. But if the opponent is not Tommy Fury when they step into the ring on August 13th, I think the man across from Jake Paul just might be Conor McGregor. And I'd love to see that. It's been almost a week since the NFL draft took place. Very interesting draft. A lot of trades were happening. Very action-packed. Teams talked about trading down before. This was the draft to trade down. But a lot of them ended up trading up. It seemed like there was formidable talent out there that they wanted to purposely go under the radar, like I discussed on our previous episode, to then make sure that those guys were still available when they were picking. Nonetheless, a lot of picks were made. Mr. Irrelevant was very popular this year. But I do think that there was a first rounder who went to the perfect team. I'm talking about Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett was picked by the perfect team, the Pittsburgh Steelers. That was a tongue twister, but I'm glad I got it out. Pittsburgh did the perfect thing in choosing him. They did right by him. Why? I'm not going to talk about the hand size. Everybody's talking about the hand size. Oh, Kenny Pickett, he did have a bit of a fumbling problem in college. Situationally, this is the best scenario for him. I don't want to hear otherwise. People forget that he played 4 years of college football in Pittsburgh. Heinz Stadium knows him. He knows the environment. He's been there. It's a place that feels like home to him. It won't feel like he's moving up or like he has that stress of having to compete. He was like a mid-round pick in the first round. There's not a ton of stress on him. Well, he was the only quarterback taken in the first round, and you didn't see another one taken until later on. But the most that he's doing is moving apartments. He might not even be moving locker rooms. For all you know, he's going to have the same college locker room that he did. He's going to have the same locker room in the pros as he did in college. He's in the perfect scenario. He can grow. He's with a coach that's never had a losing season on a team that just made it into the playoffs with a less than formidable roster and a less than formidable quarterback. He can also learn a thing or two from Mitch Trubisky. I don't know how much they want to allow Mitch Trubisky to mentor him, but people are talking about how Mitch is the better quarterback and how he will start. I'm sure he will, which will give time Kenny to grow on the bench. But also, for those out there arguing that Mitch Trubisky is the guy, Mitch Trubisky is a classic 50-50 quarterback, what I like to call a 50-50 quarterback. For every great play he makes a really bad one. For every touchdown he throws a pick. For every game he wins, he loses one. And maybe that ratio leans a little bit more in favor to the picks and the losses than it does the wins and the touchdowns. So you have to be careful with that. Yes, he is QB1 as of right now, probably. But I don't know how long that'll last. I don't know if he's the starter at the end of the season. And if I was a betting man, I probably wouldn't assume that he would be. It just doesn't make sense to have Mitch there. The argument that Pittsburgh is committed to him is irrelevant in my mind. The middle-aged quarterbacks right now, Ryan Tannehill-aged quarterbacks, are making around $27 million per year. That's the target number. Pittsburgh is not paying Trubisky that. They don't plan to. They're not committed to him long-term. They know he's a bridge guy. Kenny Pickett could potentially be a star quarterback. Worst case scenario, they trade up years later when they figure out that Kenny didn't work or Mitch didn't work, and they can find a way to make it work. They always have. They don't need a super high pick, since they usually don't have them, if we're being honest, because they're a winning franchise. And best case scenario, Kenny Pickett ends up being the answer. They've had only a couple quarterbacks in the last 30 years. It hasn't been a long list. They figure out how to make it work. It's funny how the good coaches find a way to make it work. It's funny how the Ravens consistently get great players on defense even when they don't have the highest picks. It's funny how they got one of the best quarterbacks in the league at the bottom of the first round, Lamar Jackson. Great franchises will find a way to make it work. Pittsburgh is doing the same. And Kenny Pickett has landed in the absolute perfect place. So with that quick draft recap, that's the end of this episode of the Benjamin Kira Show. I thank you so much for tuning in. Remember to like, subscribe, turn on the bell for notifications. The Substack link is in the bio. Never miss a story or an episode. You can get notified when these episodes go out. It'll go directly to your inbox. So make sure to sign up there as well. And believe me, I am open to conversation. If you want to tweet at me, if you have an opinion, even if it disagrees with mine, we can have a great conversation. We can figure out a way to make it work, find a middle ground. And if not, nonetheless, it's a great sports debate. You can contact me on Benjamin Cure TV on Twitter, Benjamin.Cure on Instagram. And until next time, you're watching The Benjamin Cure Show. Have a good week, everybody.